You didn't find this story by chance. You were tuned into it before you pressed play. Something quiet but ancient has been humming in your field, and now it's guiding you back. Not to effort, not to performance, but to resonance. This isn't a teaching. It's a remembering. In a world trained to chase wealth through hustle and grind, what if true abundance moves towards stillness, not speed? Let's soften the noise together. Take a breath. Notice the quiet beneath your thoughts. That's where this story begins. Before we begin, check in. Where are you listening from? And what time is it? This matters. Because you're not just here to absorb. You're here to awaken the signal within you that was never broken, only buried. Picture now not your problems, but your frequency. Picture not your to-do list, but your field. This is the moment your wealth stops hiding. This is where the vault opens from within. Let's begin slowly. You didn't stumble into this message by accident. You arrived at the exact moment your field shifted, maybe not in a loud way, maybe not with fireworks or signs, but with something softer, something sacred, something underneath the noise. A breath, a pause, a feeling that you're not just hearing words, but remembering them. You've been taught to believe that wealth is the prize for suffering, that it arrives after proving your value, that it's a finish line you must crawl toward. But let's begin somewhere different. Let's begin in the place beneath all of that, where wealth isn't a reward for exhaustion, but a natural consequence of coherence. Where you are not here to chase anything, but to remember what you already carry. Feel the space around those words. Not with logic, but with presence. This story doesn't live in ideas. It lives in vibration. And you're already feeling it, aren't you? That hum behind your ribs, that shift in your breath, that awareness that something is organizing itself not from outside in, but from inside out. That's where we begin. You were never designed to fight your way to abundance. You were designed to become it. Wealth, true wealth, is not a static number or a distant lifestyle. It is a field harmonic echo that surrounds and responds to your most embodied signal. And your signal is not your personality, your resume, your goals. It's what your nervous system believes is safe. It's what your breath does when you're not pretending. It's how your energy settles when you stop trying to impress or perform. Most people never access this layer because they are busy generating noise. But right now, you're beginning to emit signal, and signal is what the field responds to. Your life has already shown you the truth of this, hasn't it? The moments when things flowed without explanation, the strange timings, the invisible doors that opened just as you stopped trying. Those were not coincidences. They were confirmations. The field has always been listening. You're just now learning to speak its language. And it doesn't speak English, or numbers, or logic. It speaks frequency. Let's go deeper. Not higher, not harder, just deeper. Because this isn't about getting something you don't have. This is about accessing what you stopped trusting. That inner tuning fork, the one that vibrates when something aligns and tightens when something doesn't. You were taught to override it. You were told to rationalize discomfort, to normalize misalignment, to betray your own rhythm in service of someone else's map. But no map knows what your body does. No calendar knows what your breath does. You have always been broadcasting. The only question is, were you broadcasting from survival or from sovereignty? And right now, you are crossing that threshold. Feel it. The difference between striving and summoning. Between grasping and allowing. This is not theory. This is frequency. You don't shift it by thinking harder. You shift it by releasing what never matched you in the first place. And in that release, something opens. Not out there, but in here. You may feel tired, and that's okay. You may feel skeptical, and that's welcome. You may feel both the ache of hope and the sting of disappointment all at once. That, too, is coherence. Because this isn't about pretending to be positive. This is about becoming honest. Deeply, safely, softly honest. With what you need. With what you want. With what you've been afraid to say out loud. Because someone once shamed you for wanting too much. But the truth is, you were never asking for too much. You are asking from too little. From depletion. From disconnection. But now, you return to the source. The source that doesn't run out. The source that is you. Can you feel it begin to respond? Not with evidence, not with certainty, but with presence. A subtle reorganizing. A gentle recalibration. The beginning of the signal becoming clean. Money is not chasing you. It's orbiting, waiting for the right alignment to lock in. And that alignment isn't a list of steps or affirmations. It's a nervous system that feels safe to receive. A voice that no longer whispers lack. A field that no longer carries static. Most people try to manifest from a place of fracture. They light candles from scarcity. They set goals from shame. They visualize from a place that doesn't believe it's allowed. But you're not doing that anymore. You're not asking wealth to save you. You're inviting it to reflect you. There's a difference. One vibrates with desperation, the other with truth. And truth has always been magnetic. Let's talk about the vault. Not the one outside of you, the one within. You have one. You've always had one. It's not locked because you lack the key. It's locked because you were never taught how to feel the resonance required to open it. The key isn't effort, it's coherence. And coherence begins when your body stops bracing. When your inner world feels safe enough to stop performing. When you're no longer waiting for permission to trust your own field. Every layer of tension you release is a frequency adjustment. Every breath you take without agenda is a signal sent. Every time you choose rest over hustle, truth over pleasing, resonance over reward, you turn the key a little more. The vault isn't a metaphor. It's real. It lives in your biofield. And as you read this, it's already vibrating differently. There are moments when we feel close to something we can't explain. A dream that felt more real than reality. A conversation that rearranged your beliefs. A moment in nature where your mind went quiet and your cells went loud. Those are not anomalies. Those are glimpses. And the more you listen, the more you calibrate. Wealth doesn't arrive as a gift from the universe. It arrives as a reflection of your field. And your field is becoming clearer with every silent yes. Every soft exhale. Every decision not to chase what doesn't feel right. That is the work. That is the signal. That is the vault opening. Let's remove pressure. Pressure scrambles the signal. Let's remove shame. Shame blocks the field. Let's remove timelines. Timelines constrict the flow. You are not a machine. You are a transmission tower. You do not need to prove your worth. You need to hold your frequency. Not perfectly, just consistently enough for the field to recognize you. Again, because here's the truth. The quantum doesn't care about your plans. It responds to your coherence. It listens not to what you want, but to what you allow. And right now, you are allowing more than ever before. That's why you're here. That's why your body leaned in. That's why the air feels different around you now. You're not here to struggle. You're here to signal. And your signal is becoming sovereign. Breathe into that. Let it settle. Let it hum. You haven't failed. You haven't missed your moment. You've only just begun to remember how to unlock what was never outside you in the first place. What? If you stopped waiting for the proof and began responding to the pull? What if wealth wasn't a future event, but a present presence waiting to be claimed, not with force, but with frequency? Let's follow that feeling, the subtle one, the almost whisper, in your chest that doesn't shout like fear, does but glows like intuition. That gentle knowing that you're already on the threshold, not of becoming someone else, but of dissolving everything that said you had to earn your way into enoughness. You've lived inside stories of struggle. You've worn effort like a badge, and somewhere along the line, you confused effort with evidence. But resonance doesn't speak the language of striving. It hums in harmony with your being. That's why the moments of flow felt like home, not because something outside aligned, but because you, for a breath, returned to yourself. This part of the journey isn't about adding more. It's about removing the static. The beliefs layered like dust over your field, the tiny contractions of self-doubt that interrupted your current, the old vows made in moments of lack, let them soften now. They were never wrong. They were protective. But you're safe now to outgrow them. You're safe to expand. You're safe to emit a signal that no longer centers on survival, but on receiving. Receiving not just dollars or clients or offers, but yourself, fully, quietly, completely. There is a version of you already living in the resonance you're remembering. She doesn't chase. He doesn't brace. They don't convince or compensate. They simply hold. They hold frequency like a lighthouse holds light without effort, without apology. And that light doesn't beg the sea to respond. It simply shines, and ships adjust, and doors open, and timelines shift. You don't have to beg your future to arrive. You have to anchor the self who already lives inside a dot. So let's anchor her now, or him, or them. The self who doesn't shrink when a bill arrives. The self who doesn't perform when opportunity knocks. The self who doesn't count followers or numbers to validate their power. That self exists not in your imagination, but in your field. And the more often you visit her, the more often she becomes the baseline. Begin there. Don't wait for evidence. Become the frequency that evidence responds to. When you drink water, feel wealth. When you speak kindly to your body, feel overflow. When you choose rest without guilt, feel permission. These are not metaphors. These are transmissions. You are retraining your nervous system to trust its own signal. To know that safety isn't found in clenching, but in coherence. You've been told that safety means controlling the outcome. But in the quantum, safety means trusting the current. The current doesn't need your micromanagement. It needs your clarity. It needs you to stop broadcasting noise and begin broadcasting truth, even if that truth is soft. Even if that truth is, I don't know how, but I'm still open. Even if that truth is, I don't feel worthy, but I'm willing to remember. That is a powerful transmission. Not because it's certain, but because it's honest. And honesty is clarity. And clarity is magnetism. Have you noticed how the most powerful people don't push? How the most magnetic presences don't convince? They don't try to dominate. The field, they stabilize it. And the field responds. Money responds. Life responds. Not because they are louder, but because they are truer. You are becoming that. Right now. Not later. Not after a course or a certification. Not after healing every wound. But here, in this breath, in this body, in this frequency. The healing is not a prerequisite. It is a byproduct. When you return to coherence, the noise falls away. The doubt dissolves not because you defeated it, but because you no longer feed it. The need to prove softens into the permission to emit. You are emitting now. Feel it. Not in your thoughts, but in your spine. Not in your words, but in your field. You are the message. You are the resonance. And every time you stop to remember that, the field reconfigures. This isn't about being perfect. It's about being present. It's about pausing before the habitual reaction and choosing a new broadcast. It's about noticing when scarcity tries to speak through your voice and gently replacing it with stillness. Not a fake smile. Not a Bypass, a soft return, a gentle remembering. Scarcity may still visit, but you don't have to let it drive. Let it pass through. Let it dissolve in your light. You're not here to fix scarcity. You're here to stop identifying with it. You're here to tune your system to something truer, something quieter, something that feels like ease even when nothing makes sense. That's coherence. It's not positivity. It's not pretending. It's alignment. And alignment creates openings. And openings create momentum. And momentum creates timelines that couldn't exist inside your old identity. This is the new identity, not built from your past, but from your resonance. The one who trusts her own pull. The one who doesn't need to explain his choices. The one who knows when to rest, when to act, when to wait, and when to walk away. That's not strategy. That's signal. And your signal is becoming unmistakable. There will be moments when the old programs try to reassert themselves. The fear that money won't come unless you suffer. The anxiety that ease is irresponsible. The guilt that says overflow is for someone else. Don't fight these echoes. Witness them. Breathe with them. Then choose again. Every time you choose coherence over conditioning, you reinforce a new broadcast, and the field listens. The field always listens. That's why you've been seeing the signs. The repeating numbers. The perfect timing. The conversations that mirror your thoughts. You're not making this up. You're tuning in. And tuning in isn't accidental. It's intentional. You're choosing to tune your inner world more often than your outer one. And the more you do, the more you see that your outer world is just a delayed echo of what you've been broadcasting all along. The gaps between cause and effect are shortening because your clarity is strengthening, because your presence is stabilizing, because your nervous system is beginning to trust ease. And when you trust ease, you stop reaching. You start receiving. Receiving not just money, but clarity. Not just opportunities, but alignment. Not just applause, but inner knowing. That's the real wealth. The kind that doesn't spike and crash with trends or algorithms. The kind that lives in your spine, your breath, your field. The kind that can't be taken because it was never earned. It was remembered. You're remembering it now. Not by shouting it, but by living it. And the more you live it, the more you become undeniable. Not to others, to yourself. You become the reference point. You become the origin. You become the vault, the signal, the invitation. This isn't just about getting what you want. It's about becoming the version of you who doesn't need to fight for it anymore, because she is it, because he carries it, because they emit it. That's what you're doing now. That's why the air feels different. That's why your body softened. That's why your silence got louder. Because you're no longer speaking to the universe like it's deaf. You're whispering with it like an old friend. And it's whispering back. There is a moment subtle, unglamorous, often quiet when the pattern breaks. Not because the world changed, but because you no longer resonated with the version of yourself who depended on striving. That moment is happening now, not with fanfare, but with frequency. The old you, the one who delayed joy, who postponed. Peace, who calculated every breath against someone else's measure of success, is no longer at the controls. You don't need to fight that version. You only need to stop feeding it, because what you nourish grows, and what you allow softens. And in the softening, you begin to see that most of your life's waiting wasn't waiting for opportunities. It was waiting for you to turn inward, to finally meet your own field. This is that meeting. This is that moment. And there's no fanfare, because the truth doesn't need noise. It arrives like a tuning fork clear, steady, unmistakable. You are the field. You are the frequency. And as you continue living this truth, What once looked like obstacles begin to dissolve like fog in morning sun. Not because the challenges vanish, but because the signal that once attracted them no longer runs your system. You are not the static. You are the signal. And your signal now carries a blueprint of coherence, of flow, of quiet, sovereign wealth. You've been conditioned to view wealth as an external arrival, a number in an account, a symbol of worth. But in this frequency, you see that wealth is a rhythm, a returning, a remembering. It's not what you hold, it's what you harmonize with. It doesn't respond to declarations. It responds to embodiment. You don't tell the field you're ready. You become the version of yourself for whom readiness is normal. And what does that version do? She doesn't wait for permission to rest. He doesn't apologize for joy. They don't perform scarcity to be palatable. They breathe, they emit, they allow, and the field arranges itself accordingly. Emails arrive that feel like alignment. Collaborations feel like play. Payments come not through grind, but through gravity. That's the shift. You've moved from magnetizing with need to magnetizing with knowing. And knowing is quieter than hope. It doesn't ask. It doesn't posture. It simply is. That's why your life begins to feel less performative and more precise. Not rushed, but aligned. You stop sprinting toward goals because you no longer need the sprint to feel valuable. You let yourself walk. You let your breath decide. You pause not because you're lazy, but because you understand that stillness sends a signal too, and sometimes it's the clearest one. Because when you're still and your signal is clean, the field has space to deliver what you stopped chasing. Not because it was never coming, but because your previous version wasn't calibrated to receive it. You are now calibrated not to a fantasy, but to a reality that whispers, "This too belongs to me." Calibrated to rooms that once felt too bright, to numbers that once felt too big, to joy that once felt unsustainable. You don't resist the bigness anymore. You don't mistrust the expansion. You simply soften into it. And that softness, don't mistake it for weakness. It's the most powerful broadcast in the universe. Softness is coherence. Softness is stability. Softness is the nervous system saying, "I'm safe now to hold more." And when your system is safe, money feels safe to stay. Opportunities feel safe to land. People feel safe to invest. This is not a strategy. This is energetic architecture. You're rebuilding your inner world not with force, but with frequency. And every time you choose truth over performance, clarity over comparison, space over hustle, you reinforce the structure. Your field becomes livable, welcoming, potent. That's why you're noticing the shifts, not just in income, but in timing, in how people respond to you, in how you respond to yourself. Because the external is now catching up to the broadcast, you've been rehearsing in silence. This is the paradox. The less you try, the more life reveals. The less you prove, the more people feel you. The less you push, the more pathways present themselves. Why? Because resistance sends mixed signals. But you no longer need resistance to feel productive. You've outgrown the addiction to struggle. You've stopped romanticizing effort. You've stopped linking value to suffering. That's not just a mindset shift, it's a quantum shift. And quantum shifts don't happen through logic. They happen through lived resonance. Through becoming the version of you who remembers she is worthy mid-breath, who invests not to fix, but to circulate, who no longer needs to explain why he rests, or why she says no, or why they stopped forcing what never fit. Because in this new resonance, boundaries are not walls. They are invitations. Invitations for the field to meet you where you are, not where you once shrank, or once begged, or once performed. But here, now, soft, sovereign, clear. Your relationship to wealth is no longer transactional. It's relational. You don't deserve money. You match it. You harmonize with the version of you who knows how to hold it, circulate it, honor it. Money doesn't change who you are. It reflects who you're being. So when you embody scarcity, it plays hide and seek. When you embody openness, it shows up unannounced. And when you embody clarity, it stays. It multiplies. It becomes a symphony rather than a song. And you are no longer singing solo. The entire field is harmonizing with your note. The clients, the friendships, the miracles, they're not flukes. They're frequencies. You are seeing the feedback loop. You are feeling the echo. And that echo says, more is not a reward. It's a return, not a gift, a reflection. And you, your breath, your stillness, your presence, you are the one making it inevitable. So now you're no longer asking, how do I get? You're asking, how do I stay in resonance? And the answer is always simpler than the mind likes. Drink water and feel gratitude. Watch a tree and learn patience. Hold a boundary and don't explain. Say no without story. Say yes with embodiment. Take pauses like prayers. Let silence be your strategy. Let joy be your signature. You are not here to convince the world you're worthy. You're here to live like you already know. And that knowing sends out signals faster than any marketing plan. That knowing creates timelines where magic is mundane, where miracles are expected, where peace becomes your posture and prosperity becomes your pace. You are not chasing anymore. You are calibrating. You are not begging anymore. You are becoming. And the world responds, not because it's impressed, but because it recognizes you. Your wealth field is no longer a wish. It is a waveform. Measurable, magnetic, alive. You are walking proof. Not because you manifest instantly, but because you no longer identify with the part of you that doubts the delay. You wait without shrinking. You rest without retreating. You trust without evidence. That is mastery. That is maturity. That is frequency-first living. And as you keep walking, you begin to see that you don't need to know what's next. You just need to know who you are. Because when your identity becomes signal, your future becomes inevitable. You are not the seeker. You are the signal. You are not the effort. You are the echo. You are not the storm. You are the tuning fork beneath it. And the more you tune, the more life tunes to you. The air feels different when you stop broadcasting confusion. It's subtle at first, like mist lifting, like the quiet after a bell stops ringing, but it's real. And real doesn't always mean loud. Real sometimes arrives as stillness, as clarity that doesn't rush to explain itself. That's the texture of the field you're in now. It's not new, it's remembered. It's the field you were always tuned to before the world convinced you to earn what you already were. There's a recalibration happening, not just in your thoughts, but in your frequency signature. You can feel it behind your eyes, in your belly, under your skin, the sense that you're no longer waiting to become the version of yourself who gets to feel safe. You are becoming her now. You are becoming it now. And it's not because of some new strategy or external win. It's because of your willingness to stop abandoning your own energy every time fear knocks. That's the turning point. The moment you realize that fear doesn't get the last word. The moment you don't collapse into old behaviors just because doubt raised its voice. The moment you meet the tension with breath instead of reaction. That's coherence. That's mastery. That's quantum alignment. And your field notices. Your body notices. The field responds not when you force your way through, but when you become a safe place for truth to land. That's what you're doing now. You are no longer trying to deserve wealth. You are learning to hold it. And to hold it You must first become the kind of space where abundance feels relaxed, where overflow doesn't feel like an accident, where opportunity doesn't feel like pressure, where having more doesn't feel like betrayal. That's the subtle work. That's the inner environment you're shaping, not with mantras, but with presence. Not with overthinking, but with inner stillness. The version of you who believes overflow is normal doesn't chase money. She communicates through vibration. He doesn't over-explain. They don't brace, they allow. Because the field can feel. The difference between hunger and harmony is not a spotliction. It's not a spotless mind or a flawless plan. Harmony is the willingness to return to your center again and again, gently, clearly, lovingly. Each time you choose to breathe instead of panic, you anchor the new signal. Each time you pause before reacting to scarcity, you broadcast coherence. Each time you bless your timeline instead of resenting its pace, you tune your field. That's frequency fluency. That's wealth literacy. That's the invisible architecture of receivership. You are not just thinking differently. You are emitting differently. You are no longer here to impress the world. You're here to attune it. And you're doing it not someday, but now. With every breath, every boundary, every choice to move from clarity instead of fear, you reinforce a field that can actually hold what you've been asking for. You're not manifesting harder. You're stabilizing deeper. That's why the shifts are lasting. That's why your nervous system no longer spikes every time more arrives. That's why your energy no longer leaks into proving, into pleasing, into over-managing what wants to flow. You are becoming a match, not to outcomes, but to essence. And when you match essence, outcomes can't help but find you. They orbit your field because your field is clear. It is sovereign. It is resonant. It is magnetic without effort because it is honest without distortion. And that kind of honesty felt, not forced, is what the quantum responds to fastest. The universe doesn't speed up because you beg. It organizes itself because you align dot, so now you don't just hope for change. You walk as if it's already occurred. Not as delusion, but as calibration. You feel the shift before you see the result. You let that feeling inform your actions, your posture, your choices. Not in the way of pretending, but in the way of remembering. Because you are not calling in what you lack. You are calling forth what you finally feel ready to hold. And readiness isn't a checklist. It's a frequency. When you stop leaking power into timelines that don't reflect your worth, the field reroutes. It shifts people out. It draws new opportunities in. It invites you into decisions that make no sense logically, but feel like peace. That's the intelligence of your field restoring itself. That's the consequence of coherence. You don't have to know all the steps anymore. You only need to know how it feels to be in truth. And truth will lead you, softly, accurately, unmistakably. It always has. You're just now quiet enough to follow it. And because you're quiet, you can hear the next signal clearly. The feeling that you are no longer chasing abundance. Like prey, you are inviting it like a friend. And that friend shows up when the space feels warm, honest, welcoming. Not tense, not conditional. That's the space you're creating now. A field where prosperity isn't a visitor, it's a resident. It belongs. You belong. And that belonging heals more than your finances. It heals your timeline. It heals the parts of you that were taught to feel guilty for thriving, that were told wealth was dangerous or selfish or unreachable. That's what's falling away now. Not your dreams, your distortions. And when the distortions fall, the dream can land. It lands on shoulders that no longer hunch. It lands in hands that no longer clench. It lands in calendars no longer stuffed with noise. It lands in hearts that feel deserving, not because they tried hard enough, but because they stopped, apologizing for wanting more. You are not here to feel bad for your vision. You are not here to shrink your capacity so others feel comfortable. You are here to remember how to hold what's already yours on an energetic level and let the material reality catch up. It will. It already is. The momentum is building. The spaces are clearing. A match is forming. You've stopped sending split signals. You've stopped broadcasting confusion. You've chosen clarity. And clarity doesn't scream, it glows. Clarity walks into a room and says nothing, yet everything organizes around it. That's the power you're beginning to embody. It doesn't come with fanfare. It comes with peace. It comes with the quiet certainty that your field is no longer broadcasting lack. It's radiating leadership. Not the leadership of hierarchy, but of energetic stability. You become the one people feel calmer around, the one rooms feel more grounded with, the one ideas feel safer landing the side. That's what money responds to. Not desperation, but direction. Not charisma, but coherence. You are coherent now. You're not waiting to become her. You're not aspiring to be him. You're not hoping to find them. You are already it. The frequency has caught up. The resonance is active. You've exited the loop of proving. You've exited the spiral of almost. You are here. Not someday now. Not later now. Not after the next milestone now. And now, your job is simple. Remain. Remain in the frequency that feels like truth, even if the evidence hasn't appeared yet. Remain in the version of you that doesn't negotiate her value. Remain in the breath that doesn't rush. Remain in the signal that doesn't spike with fear or shrink with doubt. This is the season of anchoring, of sealing, of confirming with. Your choice is what you've been declaring with your energy. This is where signal becomes substance, where field becomes formed out, where the invisible becomes inevitable. And it's happening not because you pushed, but because you pulsed, because you trusted the invisible rhythm of your own becoming, because you stopped sprinting and started listening, because you stopped scripting and started feeling. You didn't unlock the vault by shouting at it. You became the resonance that made it open. And now, you walk through not as someone who earned it, but as someone who remembered it was never locked. You've crossed into the part of the story where your old questions dissolve, not because they were answered, but because they no longer vibrate in the field you now occupy. You no longer ask, when will it happen? Because you feel that it already is. You no longer wonder, am I worthy of more? Because your entire system now emits the truth that you are. And not just worthy, but ready. Not in the sense of having figured it all out, but in the sense of no longer needing to. You're ready because you've stopped outsourcing your knowing. You've stopped treating your nervous system like an inconvenience. You've stopped using uncertainty as a reason to delay your embodiment. And in this new space, reality begins to soften. Not collapse, not break, but reconfigure like light bending through new glass. That's what coherence does. It bends outcomes toward your signal. It doesn't override free will, but it awakens the pattern beneath it, the pattern that was always yours to remember. This remembering isn't a strategy, it's a homecoming. And in that homecoming, something exquisite happens. You stop striving to be chosen. You choose yourself, again and again, in ways so small they become sacred. You speak less, but say more. You act slower, but move further. You invest with intention and receive without tension. You are no longer at war with the process. You are in dialogue with it. You've moved from resistance to resonance, from noise to signal, from effort to essence. And essence doesn't try. It emanates. There's a new kind of discipline here, not the one you learned in school, or the one tied to productivity, but the sacred discipline of staying true to your vibration when the world still looks familiar. When the numbers haven't caught up, when the notifications are quiet, when the outside hasn't confirmed what your body already knows. That's the edge of mastery. That's where most people retreat, not because they're weak, but because they mistake the void for failure. You don't, not anymore. You see the void as recalibration. The moment before form crystallizes, the breath before the door opens. You hold the frequency not like a chore, but like a vow. You are not just visualizing wealth. You are rehearsing the nervous system that can hold it, that can relax into it, that doesn't flinch when more arrives, that doesn't collapse when attention fades, that doesn't shrink when numbers shift. This is the wealth code: quiet, stable, internal. This is the version of you who walks into a room and knows her signal speaks louder than her words, who doesn't posture to prove, doesn't perform to protect, doesn't panic to maintain. This is the version of you who has already been hired by the field to stabilize wealth, not just for yourself, but for the collective. You are not just remembering your power. You are becoming the example of what safe wealth looks like in human form. And what does safe wealth do? It circulates. It blesses. It whispers yes into places where no one's echoed. It funds dreams, softens timelines, builds bridges. You are not manifesting just for you. You are tuning your field to ripple. Every time you choose peace over panic, you ripple. Every time you invest with integrity, you ripple. Every time you say no from your body instead of your fear, you ripple. These ripples rearrange more than you can see. They adjust opportunities, introduce allies, restore timelines. That's why you no longer measure your success in dopamine spikes. You measure it in energetic echoes, in the way your body exhales after a choice, in the way your sleep deepens after a boundary, in the way your creativity flows when you stop monitoring its metrics. That's wealth, not a number. A nervous system that knows how to receive, a field that knows how to radiate. You radiate now, not with perfection, but with presence. And presence needs no polish. It needs no pitch. It simply needs space to be felt. And space is what you've been creating all along, quietly, faithfully, breath by breath. You no longer need to be the loudest signal in the room. You only need to be the clearest. Clarity is the new currency. Not clarity of plan, but clarity of presence. Not clarity of how, but clarity of who. You are clear. You are becoming clearer. And the clearer you become, the more you realize that the field has always been organizing around your subtlest beliefs. Not your conscious thoughts, but your embodied assumptions. And when those assumptions shift from it's hard to it's safe, from I have to I get to, from I hope to I know, the field reprograms. You don't beg reality to change. You become a new version of reality that no longer attracts distortion, that no longer clings to crumbs, that no longer overfunctions to avoid abandonment. You've abandoned nothing within you. You've left no part behind. And that wholeness, that reintegration, is what makes you magnetic beyond logic. People will say, something about you feels different. They'll feel calmer in your presence, safer in your orbit, not because you're perfect, but because you've stopped fracturing yourself to be liked, because your energy no longer whispers, I'll betray myself if you ask nicely. You don't. You won't. That's the shift. That's the signal. That's the version of you who doesn't just receive more, she keeps it. He multiplies it. They expand it, not to prove, but to participate in the bigger unfolding, in the new architecture, in the timeline where wealth is not hoarded, but harmonized. So now you walk differently, not faster, but steadier, not louder, but more rooted. You understand that urgency is not alignment. That scarcity wears many costumes: urgency, overgiving, people-pleasing, even spiritual hustle. You take none of those roles anymore. You don't need to be the fixer, the savior, the expert. You only need to be the frequency. The rest organizes around that. People feel it. Invitations find it. Miracles match it. That's why you're less reactive. That's why you feel less impressed by chaos and more in love with silence. Because silence is where you refine your tone, your internal music, the song your field hums in between thoughts. And that song, when clear, when kind, when sovereign calls everything home, you're not trying to create a life anymore. You're creating a tone, a hum, a field so resonant that reality bends toward it, not because it must, but because it can't help it. You've become available. Available to beauty. Available to support. Available to joy that doesn't require contrast. Available to overflow that doesn't apologize. Available to timelines that don't repeat pain to prove. Growth. You've graduated from that curriculum. You are no longer learning through suffering. You are learning through signal, through noticing, through presence, through play. And play isn't the opposite of power. It's its purest form. You're not done. You're deeper. You're not finished. You're unfolding. You're not waiting. You're welcoming. This part of your life isn't about arrival. It's about embodiment. Not about what's next, but about who's here. And who's here is a version of you so honest, so soft, so encoded in truth, that life reorganizes itself simply to be near you, not because of entitlement, because of resonance. And resonance is never accidental. It is always designed. You are the design. You are the vault. You are the field. You are the frequency. This is the chapter where reality starts to echo you back, not as a test, but as confirmation. Not as a reward, but as reflection. The people you meet begin to speak your language without knowing it. The messages that find you feel tailor-written by a wiser version of yourself. The timing of things stops surprising you, not because you expect control, but because you've surrendered to precision. This is the landscape of alignment. Not a utopia, but a clear field where your signal travels further, unblocked. You walk differently now, not with more confidence, but with more coherence. You don't walk to arrive, you walk to transmit, and each step becomes a broadcast. Each boundary a recalibration, each pause a portal. You are no longer asking for wealth like someone requesting entry. You are holding wealth like someone who belongs. And that holding is not about the size of your account. It's about the spaciousness in your system. The way your body breathes when you make decisions. The absence of bracing when you speak your truth. The stillness that precedes your receiving. That is wealth. Not performance, but presence. Not noise, but tone. And tone, when stable, becomes the most magnetic thing in any room. You're noticing this now, not just in how others respond, but in how your inner world quiets. The old loops, comparison, compensation, contraction, don't land the same way. They try to pull you back, but there's nothing left for them to grab. You've emptied the hooks. You've deleted the permissions. And now you move through life not as a seeker, but as a steward. Steward of the signal. Steward of your field. Steward of the resources flowing toward you, not because of hustle, but because of harmony. Harmony is not always comfortable. Sometimes it demands subtraction. Sometimes it arrives with endings, not to punish, but to prune, not to test, but to align. You've learned how to stay calm during those endings. You've stopped calling them failures. You now see them as frequency. Edits realignments in real time. That's why your nervous system doesn't collapse with uncertainty anymore. You've learned how to sit with the void without needing to fill it with fear. That stillness you used to avoid, it's now your sanctuary. The quiet you once mistook for stagnation, it's now the womb of your next chapter. You no longer rush. The in-between. You no longer chase outcomes to soothe discomfort. You sit. You breathe. You broadcast from center. And the field, always listening, always reflecting, begins to respond with more elegance than you thought possible. You open an email, and it feels like a nudge. You meet a stranger, and it feels like a memory. You turn down one path, and it feels like a plan. But there is no plan, not in the old sense. There is only resonance. There is only the tuning of your system, again and again, until the outer world can't help but mirror the inner one. And that mirror becomes more than validation. It becomes a tool. You learn from it. You speak to it. You edit your signal based on what it returns. Not with blame, but with curiosity. Not with control, but with care. You are careful now. Not cautious, but full of care. You care about what you emit. You care about what you allow. You care about what you water with your attention. Because you've realized everything responds to your vibration. Money, time, creativity, connection, peace. They're all fluent in your tone. They don't respond to declarations. They respond to coherence. And you are becoming fluent. You are no longer trying to hold everything together. You are becoming the structure, the rhythm, the resonance. This isn't about keeping up. This is about tuning in. And the more you tune in, the more you realize that overflow was never out of reach. It was just out of range. The signal was always there. You were simply on the wrong frequency. Now you're tuned to receiving without gripping, to giving without depletion, to holding without tension, to saying yes without sacrifice. And the field responds. It doesn't delay when your signal is clean. It doesn't hesitate when your signal is steady. It doesn't doubt when you no longer doubt yourself. That's the secret. Not that life changes when you push harder, but that life aligns when you trust deeper. And your trust is no longer theoretical. It's cellular. It lives in your exhale, in the calm beneath your calendar, in the way you no longer chase closure or micromanage every how. You don't need to know all the steps. You only need to know your tone. Your tone is clear now. It doesn't spike when challenged. It doesn't tremble when delayed. It doesn't shrink when misunderstood. Because you've stopped outsourcing your worth to what happens next. You've stopped waiting for reality to validate what your soul already knows. And that knowing has changed everything. It's softened your edges. It's sharpened your discernment. It's widened your capacity. You can hold more now, just in your hands, but in your field. You can hold paradox, hold ambiguity, hold silence. And in that holding, you've made space for miracles, the kind that don't shout, the kind that arrive like the next breath, already known by your body before. Your mind catches up. This is the way of resonance. Not a path you walk, but a frequency you become. And once you become it, the vault doesn't need a key. It opens as a mirror. It opens because you do. The vault was never about access. It was about identity. And now that your identity is no longer shaped by past lack, the vault sees you as familiar, as aligned, as worthy, not because you begged, but because you remembered. And in that remembrance, you stopped rehearsing scarcity. You stopped downloading fear. You stopped mimicking other people's strategies that were never designed for your nervous system. You returned to your own map, your own pulse, your own rhythm. And in that rhythm, everything changed. Not instantly, but inevitably. Because this isn't the kind of change that flickers. This is the kind that roots, that rewires, that redefines who you think you are and what you think is possible. You are no longer here to survive the shift. You are the shift, the embodied proof that wealth isn't granted to the loudest voice or the busiest calendar. It's magnetized to the most regulated field. And you are regulating now, not with rules, but with rhythm. Not with pressure, but with presence. This is how wealth becomes normal. Not through force, but through familiarity. You no longer flinch when more arrives. You no longer self-sabotage when things feel good. You let it feel good. You let it last. You let yourself be seen, be served, be held, not with apology, not with explanation, with trust, with simplicity, with grace. And that grace your grace opens, doors your hustle never could. It writes timelines your plans never imagined. It broadcasts in dimensions logic can't map. You are no longer building success. You are becoming resonance. And resonance is what moves mountains. Not because it tries, but because it tunes everything around it into harmony. That's your work now. Not to climb, to hum, not to chase, to echo, not to strive, to stabilize. And as you stabilize, you realize the vault isn't where the wealth lives. The vault is who you are when you stop hiding. The vault is how you sound when you stop splitting. The vault is the field you carry when you're no longer afraid of your own light. You are not afraid anymore. You are here. Full presence, full tone, full frequency, and the world adjusts accordingly. And now, as the field settles and the hum quiets to a steady pulse, you realize there is nothing left to become only more of yourself to allow. The vault is no longer a destination or a metaphor. It is breath. It is body. It is you unfurled. The version of you that once whispered, maybe someday, now walks as already. The doors are no longer locked. The map is no longer missing. The signal is no longer mixed. What remains is resonance, a life shaped by truth, not tension. You don't need to convince the universe anymore. You are the confirmation. You are the tone that alters timelines, the presence that reshapes probability. And as you close your eyes, or open them, or simply breathe into this soft, steady knowing, let it land. You are the frequency. You are the invitation. You are the wealth you've been waiting for. So let the world meet you here, not in striving, not in proving, but in signal. A vault is open, and everything is listening.